Um, I don't want to be a stickler, but let's remind ourselves of the Beit Hadash. So that's the Evana, that's the tour, Evana Ezer Siman Kaf Vav. And if you look at this Bach Bet, so in the Bach Bet, he was bothered by the fact that the tour said, after he said that a Pilegish is Asur, he said, V'ken katab Adoni Harosh, and the Bach was upset. Why V'ken? Because the simple reading of the Rosh is that the Rosh does not think that there's an Isser of a Pilegish. The whole reason why the case that he was talking about was of a woman who is being, the family can request the Beis Din to force the man to let her go, even though she wants to be there, to force her out, because she's a Pilegesh, and he's over a Nida with her. And so it sounds like the real reason is that because she's over Nida, because they're violating Nida, that seems to be the reason that the Rosh wants the family. What? Gary, I put your mute on.
No, sorry.
So it seems like the reason is because of Nida. And then the Bach says, no, actually the Rosh says that's just an additional reason. And really it's because of Pilegish. And the reason why they can force her out is because Pilegish is forbidden. And you can't let them have a Pilegish. I can't let the man have a Pilegish, so therefore you force them to separate. And he puts it in a funny way. He says like this. He says, it's because of Zona. And he says, Di'im lo haya ba mishum Zona, lami yuma akvim alav, dima pagam yesh kan. Elabal karcha svira le pilegish ein lahatir. In other words, he says, what would be the pagam if there's no isser? Only if it's forbidden to have a pilegish would there be a pagam. And that's the proof that the Rosh holds that pilegish is forbidden. Now, so on that, we have to look at the I think it's the Beit Shmuel. So let's go to the Beit Shmuel and Kafav, Beit Shmuel Bet. And this is back to the opinions that maybe a Pilegish is mutar. So someone want to read? Wait, Joel, are you there?
I am here. Yes.
Give me Joel. You want to read this?
Yeah.
Where are we?
We're in Beit Shmuel Ot Bet. It says Yesh Omrim Asur v'lochim al zeh mishum lo tiyeh kidesha.
Okay. So, and that's from the Ramah there. This is the Ramah brings both opinions, right? Shemutar and Asur. He's got both Yesh Omrims. So, Afal Gav, Habal Akum in Lokim min Torah, kmo shekatav b'siman tet zayin, v'chein Habal Shivcha im medamim, v'chein Habal Shivcha im medamim arayot zel lazeh, ki hakol b'gzera, kmo shekatav hamagid. Perak Aleph Halacha Aleph. Okay. So
Right,
first he says,
what's his kasha here?
His first kasha is, how can you say you're lokeh on if you have a panui and a panuya that are both from Bnei Israel, right? That are free Jews. They're lokeh, but if someone has sex with a non-Jew or a shivcha, that's not lokeh, like doesn't make any sense. That seems like more of an isser, right? You should be lokeh on that. So it should go the other way. How could you be lokeh? And he says, no. We don't make these kind of comparisons in the ayat. So you can't say like one is more chamur, therefore it gets higher punishment or something.
Right.
Like that.
It's all a gezerah. So so even though maybe you could think in your mind that it's worse to be with a Gentile, but in fact, the punishment only comes when two Jews are together.
So when you use the word gezerah, what do you have in mind?
I mean, like the similar to the distinction that we make in Torah laws of like chok umishpat. That something is just it's a chok means like it has we don't necessarily have a rationale for it. As
You mean
opposed to
Gezeres? You mean Gezeres Hakasa?
yeah, I mean Gezeres Akasav, exactly. I don't mean a Gezerah exactly. I mean a Gezerah min Hashem. A Gezerah from God, not a Gezerah from the rabbis.
In other words, it's not subject to human logic at that point.
Exactly. It's not. It doesn't exactly. It's not subject to human logic. For some reason, the Torah is more concerned or is interested in giving whipping for two Jews having relations outside of marriage than it is for a Jew and a Gentile.
Yeah,
I mean, so it's Gezerah from Hashem. That sounds like, is that from the Blues Brothers?
Yes, I think it is.
From Hashem. Anyway, I'm sorry. Okay.
So,
we're on a mission from God. That's the Blues Brothers.
But all right, mihu mashikatav lokim befilegesh ein muchrach kemash tov. All right, but it's not so obvious and not so necessary.
In other words, now he's going to like this the I want to say shorish, the root of the matter. The root of the matter is the essential question: is there actually an isser on the two Jews? And he's saying, or on Pilegish, and he's saying that's not so clear to him.
So. All right. Kamashach Uvechidushay, Moreno, Harav, Rabbeinu, etc. Yosef Matrani, Resh Kiddushin, Katav, the Rambam Irikish, he muzumenet liznut, as have Kedisha, right? The Rambam, he explains, we've seen this in other places too, the Rambam explaining to him a way that's only a Kedisha when she's like essentially mufkeret l'chol adam.
You know what? Actually, this is a great time to stop in the middle and, well, all right. No, we'll see the Rambam afterwards. Let's finish this, and then we'll see the Rambam. I'll just show you that Rambam. I sort of found that Rambam, but maybe he mentions it here. But yeah, go ahead.
V'chein katav bechesef, v'chein chatuv bechesef Mishnah sof perak bet. I think it's
Hilchot Nara B'Tula Halacha Yud Zayin. That's. I was going to show you that Rambam, but we'll see that later. We'll say that after.
It's not, but my edition of the Beit Shmuel doesn't tell me where in which halacha it is. But,
okay. But so you guessed right.
Good.
Halacha Yud Zayin. Anyway, yeah.
Good. Gam Haramban b'tshuva katav keshehi pilegesh leke isur ladat Harambam afilu lehedyot. Right, Hainu lefi girsato shelo garas berambam behilchot malachim lehedyot asur. Right, and so we have the Ramban, which we've seen, where he says that there's no isur even to the Rambam, but he has a different girsa in hilchot malachim that doesn't have its asur for a hedyot evavilegesh. He seems to have that different girsa. All right, ve'afilu legirsateno. But even if you have our girsa, sham girsateno sham dechatav Rambam lehedyot asur mikol makom ein raya shelo kinal pilegesh. All right, but Ram never says that there's malkot for it. He just says it's asur.
Right, he says asur. So asur could mean one of two things. What are the two possibilities? It could mean asur without malkot, but I mean two kinds of reasons that agree without malkot. Well, actually, if it's asur derabanan, wouldn't there be
malkot mardut in that case?
Yeah, wouldn't there be malkot derabanan? But there could also be. There's a concept called a lav. I think it's called a
no, but mardut you got to keep separate.
Right.
Okay. Also fair.
Because marriage is at the will of the base. In other words, you never know when they can do it. Okay.
But it's also a possibility that it could be a deraita prohibition. But when we have a deraita of maybe it's just a violation of a positive commandment of not doing kiddushin, and you don't get when you violate a positive, you don't get whipped.
Isn't that could be a lav shenitak, right? If you then do kiddushin, you're fine, right? At the end of the day, also. So depending on if you think the act itself is a problem or the continuing of that act is the problem, I guess. But maybe that's too in the weeds at this point. But
yeah, that's a good question. Let's good and good teruth. It's too in the weeds. Let's go on.
Yeah, too in the weeds. Fair enough. Okay. All right. Umeharosh v'atur nired deleka isur klal. Right, and he says from the Rosh and the Tur, which we've seen this, doesn't seem like there's any Isur. All right.
Even though, well, the Tur certainly thinks that there's an Isur because the Tur said that his father, that the Rosh agrees. He seems to think there's an Isser. I don't know. He seems to think that and the Rosh we didn't see inside, but the Tur certainly thinks that the Rosh thinks there's an Isser. But he's saying no. The Tur, and as I can agree with him maybe about the Rosh, which we're about to see, but about the Tur, I don't know where he gets that from.
Well, unless you think the Tur thinks the only Isser is about the Tefillah question and not a question.
No, that's the Rosh. Why would the Tur? The Tur doesn't say that.
Well, he does. He quotes that at the end, doesn't he? He quotes his.
Yeah, he quotes that, but before he quoted that,
It's true. He does say it's
said that it's
asur.
asur.
Yeah. So
I don't quite understand it. And even Lexi agreed with me. So, and she tries to argue with me. So, okay, go on.
Okay. Umashi katav b'darchei Moshe v'hem sfirulei the asur. Right. So, but the darchei Moshe they think it's asur.
Like he agrees with me.
V'hainu mashi katav tur b'shem tshuvat harosh dasura. Aval ein raya misham kisham asur mishum devusha litbol uva lea benida. Aval mishum isur pileg esh. Yesh lomar demutar. All right. He says he's essentially claiming they only think the problem is about that she won't go to the mikveh, and there's no other problem. And there's no problem with pilegesh at least. So, all right. V'yesh raya midivrei arosh reish ketubot deleke isur befilegesh sherei katav sham diachol lekayem piryar v'ya befilegesh. This was Lexi's argument, right? Said that the Rosh says in another place in Ketubot that you can fulfill Piryar V'Yad with a Pilegesh, which I don't know if I fully, personally, I'm just going to insert myself here, fully follow that necessarily means that he thinks Lechatchila Pilegesh is mutar. It just might mean that if you had sex with a Pilegesh and she had kids, that you fulfilled Piryar V'Yad, right? It's
right. I don't see the connection between the two. Why can't you fulfill Piru or Vu even if the Isser is forbidden? I mean, with a, maybe if with a Goy, that you wouldn't fulfill Puravu, maybe because the children aren't Jewish, or if you're,
but a mamzer fulfills Purarvia, right?
Exactly. So why, if a mamzer does, which is a forbidden relation that causes a mamzer, why? And we don't say that forbidden relation is not forbidden. So why here?
I think we'd have to see what the language is in the.
Pressure. Sorry. I would just say there's pressures mounting here. I mean, because if we look upon marriage primarily for Pru-Revu, right? So then we want, there's a reason for wanting it to be as quote unquote as kosher as possible. It's a matter of fitting in all these halachas. Anyway,
right? Obviously the ideal marriage wouldn't, but be with a pilegish. But still, why wouldn't you fulfill? Why couldn't you say that you could fulfill?
Sorry.
Why couldn't you say you could fulfill?
Then you have the pressure on the other side is that they're getting here. You have pilegesh, which seems to be a quote unquote a marital relationship of some sort, and they're getting rid of some are getting rid of pilegesh. So it doesn't go smoothly. This whole thing. One form or another. I'm sorry, I interrupted. Yeah, I interrupted. Yeah.
He seems to be connecting Puravu with the fact that it must be not an Avera, which to me and Josh and a lot of people, I think, doesn't seem to be a logical step. But fine, let's go on.
All right.
And now he's talking about the Bach.
Oh, I was just saying that it would be interesting to see. Like, I agree that that logical step isn't convincing, but it may be more a question of seeing the language of the Rosh. And if in that context he talks about it as if one of the ways to fulfill Pilovia is to go ahead and have a Pilegesh, then you could be more convinced by it.
So, right. I mean, if the Rosh himself says that you should do that, then that would be true.
Okay.
But now he's going to attack the Bach. The Bach, remember, let's remind ourselves, the Bach said, well, if you're telling her to go out of the house, it must be because the Pilegesh is Aser, because what Busha would there be if it's not Aser? It would be a valid form of marriage, so what's the problem?
Okay. גם מה שהבין בך מתשובת הראש, שכתב בני משפחה יכולים למחות לזה, דמייחד לעצמו פילגש, תפגם להם, שתהיה פילגשו, דבושה הוא מחמת האיסור, ולטה, כי הבושה הוא שתהיה פילגשו ואין ראויה לו. All right. He says, no. The Bach says, what, that could only be if there's an Isser. No, it's a busha because it's societally inappropriate. Like she does not right for him to have a pilegish.
Right. In other words, the Bach, I mean, you could generalize this maybe correctly and say that the Bach sees things in terms of halacha. In other words, if the halacha permits it, then what's the busha? It's permitted. The Torah wouldn't permit something that has any hint of being not allowed. I mean, and yet, and the Beit Shmuel says, the Torah could permit, certain things that still are embarrassing.
Okay. Aval ken tzarich lomar ken the imushum isur pilegesh kashe. I think it was tirtze lamar, but I can't remember what it was here. Belo hakpadat b'nei mishpacha amutal al beitim luchot lo. All right. Veoter nire gam ledat hatur eni sur befilegesh ela mashakatav kofino tolot siyami beito hainu keshiyesh lachush dehibusha litbol. Right. Yes, I think he says right that we have nothing here that says that if the mishpacha didn't care that the beitin would have to go separate them, right? Except for the Torah saying that, but it's only because of tefillah and not because of actually an isur there.
Right. In other words, right.
Okay. V'nishma mikol hani deot de ein lo kino pilegesh afilu ha isur ein muvar lehedja. He says not only does it seem that you don't get lashes for it, but there might not actually be an explicit isur on it. Okay. I think it's ve'ein lomar here. Ich salka datach lomar deleka isur befilegesh hay kaimelan kala below bracha surah kinida ufilegeshi below bracha v'kiddushin. Right. So wait a second. You might have said that we have a general principle if you don't say sheva barachot with a kala that she's asur to the husband as if she were an ida, and pilegesh doesn't have brachot of kiddushin, right? Because there's no kiddushin. So maybe it's a brachot of kiddushin. Sorry, not the brachot of sheva brachot, if I remember correctly. V'gam kashe ich muteret lamelach. All right, but so how can she be muteret lamelach? Kvarti res b'tshuvat Rambam. Siman reish pei daled. Davka kesherot seli shai shat shtiye knuyalo lechol davar v'tia asura lechol adam azam Torah shekadesh ota. Vichnosot lechupa vivarech sheva barachot aval pilegesh ein tzarich bracha v'kiddushin. Says no. If we base ourselves on the Ramban there, that's only if you want to actually have somebody who's a full spouse, a full wife in this case. Then you need all the brachot in order to actually have
in other words, it's very strange. He's saying like it's very strange. He's saying the mitzvah of kiddushin is for those who want kiddushin. If you want kiddushin, then you have to do the mitzvah of kiddushin, and you have to do it with the 7 brachot or with the brachot and do it properly. And if you don't do that, then you're forbidden to her. But if you're not interested in kiddushin, then bavakasha, go have civil marriage. In other words, the Torah is giving you 2 avenues. It's a very strange idea to me. Rabbi. Comments?
No, I mean, why do you call it civil marriage?
Well, I mean, marriage that's not kiddushin.
Okay,
I'm modernizing it a little bit. That's all.
Yeah, I think they're trying to create. You're right. I am agreeing with you. They're trying to create a twofold system, or not. In other words, there's some are saying that same people like it's us. How far can you go in creating another track? Which the primary track seems, at least for the rabbis, has all sorts of protections. We may have certain questions about the protections, but nonetheless have projections of legitimacy. Then you have a second track, and that's the big question. Are there Kedushin there or not? I mean, if there's Kedushin and no Ketubah, maybe you say there's...
Right, that's also true.
What makes it a legitimate track for them? What makes it a
right? No, it's worth pointing out that the Beit Shmuel is assuming that there's no kiddushin by a pilegesh,
right? Where
we saw there were opinions that there could be kiddushin, just no.
Yeah, ketubah. I mean, this is later. I mean,
right?
It's good to see it at the seam when we saw it in the tour and the Beis Yosef and the rest. You see the seams there. What are we creating? So for the Beit, help me. So for the Beit Shmuel. What is the din of pilegesh right now for the Beit Shmuel? What's the halacha?
Well, it seems like you would do some kind of yi'ud. You would appoint the woman as your pilegesh, and then
pikud or yichud. Okay, fine.
Yi'ud or yichud in the sense of liyachedota to designate her, and there would be no kiddushin and no ketubah, and I don't know about Gittin, but anyway, I don't know how we get, if we have to have a get, I guess no Gittin if there's no Kedusha. But then that would be permitted. And that would be permitted.
Sorry to ask a question. Are they being sympathetic to the majority of people that would find it financially problematic to enter into Kiddushin because of the responsibilities? Are they generally trying to provide a way around the situation to make it more feasible for people to actually end up in relationships, either because they will anyway, or because they want to kind of promote it as an alternative route to what is an expensive commitment otherwise if you're unable to afford it?
Well, it may have been. Actually, Shana sent out to me, I could send to everybody if they wanted, a long article about Pilegesh in the medieval times, and that it was actually not common, but it was common enough that there were poskim that got shilas about it, and it was being done. And it could be that once people are doing it, we want to keep them in the fold. We don't want to push them out of the religion. So I don't know if it was intended to be made so that to save money, but people were doing it more. I think that's more the idea. People were doing it, so maybe there was a need to justify it. That could be. But that's already, second guessing the posek. The posek may, on the other hand, be purely understanding it by his own logic, and he has so many reasons to think that if Pilegesh is mutter, that when he comes across these difficulties, he has to fit them in, because he has other reasons that tell him that a Pilegesh is mutter, like the Ramban mentioned about how so many important people had Pilegesh, in the Tanakh. Any other questions or comments, thoughts?
Yeah, my other thought is that we have here, what do we do with an individual's concern, certainly the man, but maybe the woman, the concern of a family, then not mentioned here, but it's mentioned in the tour, in the Beis Yosef, but the family's concern, and not just the family's concern, then the base thing's concern, and once you get there, you're almost talking public policy. In other words, it may be mutter, but do we want a public policy? Do we want to have a Pelegish situation? When I was a young rabbi in the minyan that I had a couple that were getting married to be Pelegish. I wasn't doing the ceremony, and the ceremony was not in Los Angeles, even though it sounds like Los Angeles. It probably was in Las Vegas, but I don't know where it was. And so the whole question is, could they have a kiddush at my minyan? They were getting married. It would be a Pelegish situation.
Really?
They had arguments for it, including much easier in terms of getting. They had all sorts of arguments for it. But and I said, I said not kick anybody out, but I was kind of like talking to them, but I said to have a kiddush is kind of like to recommend it. And they said, well, first of all, there wasn't a problem for them because they actually thought it was something to be recommended. Then, how about a small kiddush? I won't go into what exactly happened, but we have a public policy issue here. Do we want Pelegish on the menu or don't we? In terms of relationships. I'm not asking you to tell me if we're doing that or not, but I think it actually it's worthwhile thinking about.
Yeah, I remember years ago people talking about Pilegesh as a solution for unmarried women.
Oh.
Right.
People don't have money. People that are in graduate school. I don't know. That's an example.
Right. But okay, that was before the days of in vitro fertilization, where women nowadays don't need a man, so they don't need to be a Pilegesh.
There's still a relationship. Whatever. Okay, I'm off.
If you look,
what the financial considerations are that would make being a Pilegesh, like having a Pilegesh marriage, easier than
a ketubah.
Could you play that out a little more?
A ketubah in the sense of what are the what are the responsibilities of well, usually classical ketubah of a man to the woman. Also in terms of what is she expected to do in the family. They want a more open work structure, or what they owe each other. Why not use a classic form called pilegesh?
Well, I think it's also to get around the gezerah. It's also maybe to get around the gezerah of Rabbeinu Gershom that shouldn't have two wives.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to have pilegesh as a second wife, I mean that's what I heard people talking about. But let's just get one more opinion about the heter. Is the Baragola here? If you look at the Baragola bet, he says, you see that? I didn't. If you look at the Baragola there, I have it. By me, it's right underneath the Shulchan Aruch, like inside the square. And he says in bet, aval eno loke min Torah im eno mizumenet umufkeret lekol kedat harayvit sham v'shar ha'mefarshim. So he comes out in favor of the Ravid, that it's only if she's muzmenet lekol, and if you wait, okay, the Rambam also seems to say. See, people are getting it from the Rambam. Where is it? I'm just looking if I see it quickly here. All right, I don't have it right in front of me. So let's go on. Let's go on to the next halacha in the Shulchan Aruch. So I think we read the Ramah, actually on halacha Aleph. Right. So if you look in Bet, he says, "Im echnis isha lechuppah, eno mitkadeshet bekach, v'yesh omrim shehu safek." So the Beis Yosef talks about this. This is Rav Huna in the Gemara. It's a Gemara. Rav Huna in the Gemara holds that she is mikudesh. She has a kal v'chomer, but basically we reject that opinion because, after all, the Mishnah says b'shlosha drachim aisha nikneset. And that's it. No fourth way. So not by chuppah. But there's a safek because the Rabbeinu Hananel says that maybe the halacha is like Rav Huna. So here we're paskening that yesh omrim shu safek. So in other words, we're not going to marry somebody with a chuppah, but if it happened that, I don't know, people went onto a chuppah, didn't have a ring or whatever, and now they want to say, well, we don't need a get. Maybe we do need a get. We'll make them have a get out of safek. But in other words, obviously, we're not going to marry people.
The Gemara there doesn't definitively get rid of. That's the problem. Definitively get rid of Rav Huna. It argues with Rav Huna, but you don't have like a statement that somehow seems to get rid of Rav. I mean, at least in terms of how the Rishonim read it, and therefore it may be a safek. It'd be a safek kiddushin.
Okay. Right, but there's an important cloud to understand, which is that in all these sfeikot, we don't want to leave things. We're going to be lechumra in every way by marriage because we don't want mamzeri. We don't want people who have a doubt about their name. So if there's a safek, we're not going to marry somebody without a ring, without some kind of transaction, just because maybe a chuppah works without that. Because we're going to get into trouble, like if we do that. Well, actually, if we did that, we wouldn't have so much trouble. We wouldn't, because the worst case, they're just out of wedlock. But we're not going to rely on that. But we are going to rely on the chumrah in the sense that if it happened, we would still require a get.
Just a question on that. So I know, what do we think the Machaber thinks chuppah is? In other words, it seems like some of the stuff on the Gemara seems like it's just like he takes her into his house as opposed to like a chuppah, or some like marriage ceremony with a structure that looks like a chuppah, and in other words, by the time the Mechaber has it, like, what does he think it actually is, do we think? Or is it, he knows that in the sugya, it seems like it's probably like taking her to her house, therefore that's what it is, and he knows that.
That's a good question. I'm not sure. Maybe Rabbi Landis has an answer?
Well, I think like closer to the Yemenites, where it's kind of like coming into a house. Even the chuppah that they had was like a house. And therefore, the problem is that it fits very well for Nesuin, but it doesn't fit for, I think really the problem is it fits for Nesuin and it doesn't fit for
right.
It doesn't fit for Erusin, for Kedushin, the chuppah. It doesn't fit for that. In other words, so
unless you think that them like, unless you think that him bringing her into his chuppah, where a chuppah is sort of like a house, is effectively bia, in which case, like she should be mikudesha. There's no that should work for kiddushin as well.
Chuppah is a fourth thing. It's not shtar, and it's not bia, and it's not kesef. So it should be different from. It would be just bringing her into your house, and that's all.
Right, but presumably if they were aging and you know that she's been brought into the house, and
why would that be bia?
Like, wind that whole thing up.
It's a good question. It's a good question. But you're saying, well, but we do have an idea of chuppah.
Do we?
Yeah.
Right, yeah. I guess maybe the question that I don't, like the historical question I don't have the answer to is like, when does chuppah stop meaning like bringing her into his house and start meaning some other thing that.
You're right. It's a very good question.
Which is reasonable to write on an invitation. The chuppah is at 4:00.
Right. Well, we do kiddushin tachat a chuppah, so we do them simultaneously.
Yeah.
But it used to be that you would do the kiddushin, and then maybe a year later, you would bring her into your house. A man would bring the woman into his house, and that would be the chuppah. But the kiddushin by bia would actually be, let's say, he would have bia with her once, and then she would still, like we talked about this before, she would still live at her family. It wouldn't be until he built the house, give him like a year to build a house and have everything and get the apartment set up, and then he'd bring her in, and that would be chuppah. And she wouldn't, and she wouldn't have, that wouldn't be considered that she was his wife fully until that time. We talked about that last week.
Right, but it seems like what's going on here is trying to answer the question, well, what happens if you skip the first step and you just bring her into your house after you've set everything up without the initial thing? Yeah. And I guess the question is like, you might have to have Amina that's just kiddushin by bia, because everybody knows what's going on and like it's very clear. That's sufficient. Maybe. If that's what you think chuppah is, if you think chuppah is like some kind of more ceremonial thing, then you have a different problem, I think. But or you don't have this particular problem.
In other words, you're saying really Rav Huna's opinion would come out lamaisa is just having a kiddushin bia at the same time as chuppah. But yeah, but that's not what Rav Huna is saying. Rav Huna, what's in Rav Huna's mind? That's really the question. He's saying it's a fourth method. It's not bia. It's chuppah. And you know what I mean? What's in his mind? What is he talking about? He's talking about bringing her into the house and not having bia with her. I mean, for how long? I don't. Yeah, it's a good. It's I don't know. It's a logistical question that I don't understand really. Right.
There's another piece to it that I would add. So let's see if I can get it. So that the chuppah. They learn chuppah out as a kal v'chomer. Those who want to say chuppah is a way of kiddushin is from a kal v'chomer. But we're saying that the three forms that we're talking about are all, in a sense, d'oraisa. What about shtar? Is shtar d'oraisa? Well, shtar is d'oraisa because it's learned out from a hakosha of a yitzia, from get, from yitzia and havaya of the two. And when we talked last time regarding, as we talked about bia, and we have, as it were, we have with bia, we have plenty of associated materials that seems to create it as d'oraisa, even though we say divrei sofrim, we talked about that, but we have that. So all three are d'oraisa, have d'oraisa. The kal v'chomer that the essentially important point, I think, the kal v'chomer that would produce chuppah, the attempted production of chuppah as a way of kiddushin, the kal v'chomer. Certainly, kal v'chomers are one of the midos shator nidreshes behen, but the rabbis are always very, very careful about a kal v'chomer creating a halacha, because a kal v'chomer seems to be outside of using pesukim, and for creation of halacha, they usually like pesukim. In any event, that plus the notion that it's 4, not 3, we create 4, not 3, seems to say chuppah is great, but not for kiddushin. Even though there's a havamina, but the havamina, in a sense, is just is rejected. That's all we can say. Not rejected by Avuna, but rejected by almost everyone else. Not everyone. Not all the Rishonim reject Avuna. Is that correct, Rabbi?
Well, he's brought as a suffix. Nobody, I think, fully accepts him as a legitimate opinion. Right. He's brought at best as a suffix. All right, let's go. Let's go on. Wait, if people have any questions,
and we had this in Basin. We had a situation in which it was a very full ritualistic chuppah, except they forgot to do the tabat. But it was under a chuppah. They did everything. They had readings galore. They had all sorts of blessings, all sorts of speeches. They forgot to do the tabat. And so the question afterwards is, can we? So he said, okay. So there's safek kiddushin. We have to do it again, but there is a status that they were married.
Right. The point is, if they would change, if they would want to get divorced at that point, you would still need to get. But if you, they really should give a ring at some point here, or something.
Yeah.
Sure, just a quick question. Isn't there shtar, and I'm sorry I'm a bit late, so I might have missed that, but isn't there shtar and kesef under the chuppah? Because like you do the ketuvah, which is technically shtar, and then you give the rings, which is also like which is kesef.
I don't think that a ketubah. I don't know. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Consider shtar.
But isn't there's like a very specific lashon the shtar is supposed to have, and it's not
right. A ketubah is a shtar, but it's not the shtar.
It's a shtar ketubah. You have to have a shtar nisui.
Ketubah, but it's not the shtar that does ketubah. That creates kedusha.
Right. So it's just. I guess the chuppah is just kesef, right? To just exchange the ring with her.
That is nowadays. That's how we not exchange. By the way, Rav Moshe has a big problem with that. But
right. No, that's what I meant.
Give a ring to the man has to give a ring to the woman, or a matbeya or something, shaveh pruta, and that's what we do. We don't do any other form of kiddushin nowadays.
When the Shulchan Aruch says chuppah, what does he mean?
That's what we were talking about. It would mean exactly the case that Rav Lance was talking about, where you forgot to give a ring, but you did everything else under the chuppah. And do we have to go back? In other words, and now they after the wedding, she realized she regrets it. She wants to get a divorce. Does she need to get? All they did was chuppah. And so out of suffix, yes, they need to get. Okay. I don't have any more things to say about it. If somebody else has something to say, I'd be happy to listen. But otherwise, let's go to Gimel. Mishenit kadsha nechshava ke'eshet ish v'chayev haba aleha v'tzrichat get latira ashuk. So we talked about this also before, that I think we saw on the tour, that if you, the ones who do the kiddushin, even if you didn't, she's now hasn't living in your house, she's living in her parents' house, or you didn't do anything more than kiddushin, you're at least she's married in the sense that at least you need a get to get out of the marriage, and anyone else who has relations with her is chayiv.
I'm sorry for going back for a second, but the one line in the Parisha, which is towards the end of the Parisha before Vav.
We have to go back to the tour, you're saying.
Yeah, I'm sorry. How can you leave this stuff? Okay.
All right, go ahead.
And in the Prisha, even if he brought her into chuppah, perish below kiddush. That was our problem, below kiddush. As you said, chuppah alone.
Where are you reading? I'm sorry.
In the Prisha.
In the Prisha, what is it as the beginning of a letter?
Right before Vav. In other words, it's on bet.
Yeah.
The physician wants us to make sure we understand that he brings her to the chuppah below kiddushin.
Right. Obviously, it's without kiddushin.
No, I'm saying I bet. Okay, but why is he exacting that? Because what we wanted to try to say is that it's chuppah. How important can chuppah be on its own?
Right. Chuppah on its own. So I think that's the best case. They forgot to give the ring. The ring wasn't there. Nobody had a ring. What do you do? The chatan has no ring. So he has to give her something else. He has to have a handkerchief in his pocket. He can give her that. You have to find something to give her. You can't just say, well, the chuppah counts. All right, Gimel.
What was the Avamina that didn't work?
Because it's a Gemara. Yeah, you came late. There's a Gemara. There's Rav Huna in the Gemara.
Okay, I'll catch it up later. Sorry.
Yeah. There's Rav Huna in the Gemara who says chuppah is kone.
Wait, so when so here in the tool is right here. I'm just coming back to the question of what do we mean by chuppah, because this is like afilu im echnisa lechuppah. The situation being described is two people who are living together, and then it says afilu im echnisa lechuppah. So is it this ritual thing as opposed to like taking her into her house? Because it sounds like the whole.
Bia has to be with Adim, so they're living together, so they don't really have kiddushin. And you might say, well, I'll have everybody come over and see that she's in my house. I don't know. See that we're doing a chuppah. Is that what you mean?
There's a Meiri where he writes, Kol yichud shachar kiddushin nikra chuppah. But I think he's essentially saying that chuppah is gomer the process.
Kol yichud achara chuppah achara kiddushin
nikra chuppah.
Right. So he would have to have two witnesses. So he's saying, I'll just marry her with chuppah. I'll bring two witnesses to see that she's living with me. But he's saying, that was essentially Sarah's question. Well, why isn't that kiddush bia?
Yeah, it just seems like that's kiddush bia.
Yeah.
Maybe you say, oh, I need, I guess the one way here, maybe here's the teretz. Okay, so if you think that you can only read Ein Adam Oseh Bilato Bilatznut as applying to the narrow case of when he divorced her already, you're not going to apply that principle broadly. Then you can't just assume from having Azim that they're living together that they're having sex that's l'shem kiddushin. Therefore, actually, this is a totally different thing. This isn't kiddush bia at all. This is just something else, because we don't have the assumption that cohabiting is enough to assume that bia l'shem kiddushin has happened. Therefore, actually, when he says, I'm going to bring Aideen to show that I brought her into my house, that's like a totally different thing.
Okay,
Is
that's
that like
nice carrots.
Yeah?
That sounds good to me. And on that, we say something.
One last thing. Okay, well, no, one last thing with this. Gershon, with your Eidah, when do they wrap the chassan and kala in its house? And at what point?
Yeah, they do. They do that during Bekat Erusin, I believe.
Birkat Erusin, they do it?
Yeah.
No, because the whole sheet of that wrapping in the talus is actually chuppah.
Yeah.
So it's actually chuppah.
It's like chuppah that you can do before you're actually permitted to be in yichud together.
Mm-hmm.
It solves the problem, maybe. That's one solution.
That's one solution. There's another solution that once the kala puts on a certain headdress, an ismail, a certain scarf, that's also called by some chuppah. So yeah. As a temporary response to the question, Sarah, your question, what is chuppah? It seems to be some form of structure that seems that they are really together, that they've entered into what we would say today a construct. They've entered some sort of marital construct.
And I remember when we were learning Shabbat, we were learning about Ohel Arai and the concept of
that's right.
Down. So there is this.
Go ahead with that.
Yeah, well, there is this concept that the couple would then go into Yichud in the presence of many people, because presumably there'll be many people there in the bayit of the Hatan, because that's traditionally where marriages would have taken place.
Mm-hmm.
And then they would seclude themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And they'd be able to pull down the covers either side of this chuppah, or this weird chair that we've discussed about whether or not that forms an ohel arai or an ohel kavua for the purposes of Shabbat. But those things exist. So I wonder if this is just a different version of the same thing.
We're getting closer. Okay, Rabbi Danzig, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Let's go to Dalet now.
And we just, so then the essential thing within the tool that he's saying is that when it says afilu is that he did it with edim, because like it's part of the setup that he was in fact living with her. But the point is that he did
not
it
necessarily beforehand. He there was no ring, but there were witnesses at the chuppah, or if he didn't have a chuppah, he took her, they danced in the village square, and then all the town watched them go to his house. And he brought her into the house and shut the door.
Right.
And everyone says, well, wait a second, like Sarah said, maybe the bia, maybe it was nus. He says, but this was my chuppah. You watched that I brought her into the chuppah. So it's kedushin al yedei chuppah.
Right.
Even though there was no ring. I don't say they had to have been living together beforehand.
No, my point is that the situation he's discussing when he says afilu, even if there was a chuppah,
it could have been beforehand.
Count.
Could have been beforehand.
Was like already a situation where we were assuming that they were living together.
Yeah.
So what does it mean to say even if
but all the bias that he had with her were the shem znut, and originally when he brought her in, that was
what makes that not a chuppah?
But that doesn't count. Or it's a safek. What did the Torah say? The Torah said it's also a safek.
But it doesn't say like even if you might say it was a chuppah. It says like even if he did chuppah as a separate act, like even if he did that other act of chuppah besides living with her. So it has to be something distinct. So I guess it's edim.
I don't understand your point.
So yeah, I mean, I think this might turn on whether there's a like what I have in mind as like printed as ot bet is like separate from what comes before it or not, right? So it just seems like when he says ve'afilu im hachnisa lechupa inu kona liishto kona, then that I think it might be possible to read that as just a separate case, as opposed to he's already brought her into his house to.
Right. It's a kind of big bet, but that's after.
And then even if he did this other thing, then that still doesn't work. Just seems like it's like, okay, first case.
So then how is it different?
Second case.
The first one.
I still don't see why it's a filu.
Because it's like more ritualized, I think.
Well, that's what I'm saying. But like halachically, what's the difference? Is
the first one, because Aleph said he did nothing. Aleph said he did nothing. First of all, if he didn't do anything, then it's nothing. Then he's not married to her. And then I feel he did something. That's also nothing. That's also nothing. But Raj
might have erroneously thought
in the tool, yeah.
Right.
But
the tour said it.
Right. Or maybe he even like tried to do kiddushin, but he ended up just
right. He thought he had the ring. He thought he had the ring. He lost it. He didn't know what to do. He said, "Okay, townspeople, follow me. I'm bringing her into my chuppah, and now we're married." Feel that still nothing.
Right. Okay. So that's, yeah. I agree.
All right, now we get into the famous Badalid, which is the Gemara or the Mishnah in the beginning of Kiddushin. Ha'isha mitkadeshet b'shlosha drachim, v'kesef b'shtar v'biyah. So we're all familiar with that. Min Torah. V'chachamim asru l'kadesh b'biyah mishum pritzut. They don't want you to marry via biyah because it's unseemly. It's pritzut. Well,
I want to ask you, does it mean it is priesthood or it leads to priesthood?
No, it is. I think it means it is priesthood. It is priesthood because
which means it's really which means is that we're negating a completely halachic viable way of acting and saying the halachic way of acting is priestess.
We're
right.
Judy, I mean, I can get into philosophy.
Yes, I want to understand.
I think yes, I think that's right. I think that we're saying that things that are permitted by the Torah,
halachically correct, and they're defining it as
Eino Simken. Eino Simken. In other words, the Torah says do it, and the rabbis say don't do it.
But they also say become priestess.
Is that because pritzut is a halachic concept that's dependent on the culture?
It leads to a lot of things, but here they don't. If they said bisman hazeh, only bisman hazeh, or lefi yuridas adoros, fine. That's fine, but I mean, you give more of an argument. But here it seems a rejection forever.
Right. It's like, what do you mean? If it was permitted in the past, and what we're more holy than they were in the past? Abraham Avinu, we're more holy.
I bring it up because there's so many difficult things in how we're going to translate and understand just get shot. And then in terms of what we bring into action regarding marriage, and then all the cultural things, as you mentioned, culture that are pushbacks, and what do we do with that? It's very important some points to see Chachamim saying we're not doing this. It's priestess. It's just important to see.
Well, there are certain things that we don't do, even though the halacha, because we've become more skeptical.
More what?
More well, it's hard to put one word for all the different changes that have happened, but we are more finicky. We're istinous. We're our culture.
A word from your sponsor.
We're more German.
Yashrut in terms of the concept, not the organization. Yashrut says, yeah, there's a problem here. The notion of Yashrut says there's a problem. And that becomes part of the, there's something wrong with this. Okay.
Well, it's also Pilegish. I mean, look at the Rambam. The Rambam says Pilegish is forbidden. And, we have all these people in the Gemara, in the Torah, in the Tanakh, who had Pileg Shim. And the Rambam is basically I mean, if I can't put, I shouldn't put words into his mouth, but it seems like he's saying it's priestess. We don't want to do that. In other words, there's an idea that we don't like to say this in Judaism, but I think there's an element of thought that we are more sophisticated, more culturally advanced, than they were in the past. Things that flew in the past don't fly now.
Yeah.
I mean, which is
so
dangerous.
The other place where this becomes right, but there's a but certainly Bisman is that we've gone in the opposite direction, right? We've gone in the opposite direction that we can't think about anything, criticize anything. We have to find an answer here for the Chachamim. They say very clearly what they're doing and why they're doing it. We've gone, we've certainly gone the other way. So that's where we try to explain. Listen, the stuff works both ways. The case that I mentioned regarding the couple that wanted to go into a pelagic situation, they were looking for a solution, a certain kind of solution. They weren't just whimsy. They thought hard about it and all that. So I'm saying it can go back and forth, but nonetheless, there's a criticism here. Okay, okay, fine.
Let's since we're talking about this, let's go to Talmud Bavli Yevamot Nun Bet Amud Aleph, which is it's in the source sheet that I handed out, but you can just look for it.
What number?
It's number 18 in the second source sheet. The first source sheet, I don't remember.
Girsa Basra?
It's 18 Talmud Bavli Masechet Yevamot.
Your second Girsa.
My second.
Girsa of sheets.
Sorry, I have a hard time wrapping my head around the Shulchan Aruch right now. So basically, you're doing a bia, which is a bia kshera, but you're still punished for pritzut.
You're not allowed to do it because of pritzut.
No, but you're doing something which is kasher at the end of the day because you're doing bila with your wife. There is nothing yisur about it, right?
Yes, it's a rabbinic prohibition.
No, but you're still doing it with your wife, and that's a mitzvah d'oraita. So I don't know, just have a hard time wrapping my head around it.
Well, the rabbis forbid, Rabbeinu Gershom forbid having a second wife, and yet the Torah doesn't. So yes, the rabbis forbid things.
The act in itself is a mitzvah d'oraita. Like when you have sex with your wife, it's a mitzvah d'oraita. So basically, they're turning a mitzvah d'oraita into isur d'rabanan, which makes zero sense whatsoever.
No, I think that the second time you have relations with her, it's not. You're not going to get punished. There's the only priestess is that first time.
To who, right?
What?
It depends what's considered bia, right? If it's Gemara bia, it's considered bia. Yes, you're right. But if it's just the beginning, that's considered bia. Like when you're continuing, you're just making a mitzvah, and then according to that opinion, so you wouldn't make no sense.
No, the first part, even according to that, the first part was shouldn't have been done. It was priesthood. But once you did it, now you're married, and now any further marital relations are not priesthood, obviously.
Right.
It's just
so
that.
Instead of sending you wedding presents, they're basically beating you up.
What? New wedding present? What?
Instead of sending you a wedding present, they just give you malkut.
To both.
I understand what you're saying. How can they take something? Yeah. But I'm saying it's not so exceptional. I don't see it as so exceptional. How is this different from Rabbeinu Gershon? In other words, a lot of the Torah permits something, and the rabbis say you can't do it.
Yeah, it's the same.
It is different.
The same with lulav if it falls on Shabbat.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. The Torah says the Torah says shake a lulav, and the rabbis say don't do it.
And that is different. It is different. There is no mitzvah d'oraita to take on a second wife. You're allowed. It's permitted. But there is a mitzvah d'oraita to be mikadosh isha. It's like to get married. Like I don't think there is similar situations.
Reuben, I find it great that you're astonished. All right. I'm with you. No, seriously, I'm with you, because we've been conditioned. In other words, our ideological perceptions have not allowed us to see what sometimes the Rabbanim do. And this is what they're doing. I think my answer my answer is yes, this is what they're doing. This is exactly what they're doing.
How much of what the Chachamim are doing like this is to put a siyag?
You can use all these words, but the word they use here is princess.
No, but I'm saying it's putting a siyag to prevent princess.
I understand. That was my original question to Rabbi Danzig. I asked him, is it priestess means at least a priestess or is priestess? He answered me, it is priestess. And I think he's right, meaning I think that's what they meant.
I think so. So let's look. Let's look at the Gemara here. It's important Gemara. This is actually I put it on the share screen, but it's also but it's Yavamot Nun Bet Aleph.
Okay.
And Yavni, why don't you read it?
Rav Mangid man de mekadesh bebia, uman de mekadesh beshuka, uman de mekadesh belo shiduche, uman de mevatel gita, uman de maser mudaa agita, uman de pakir shlicha de rabanan, uman de shahi de mata de rabanan ale taltin yomin velo ati lebei dina ותבע לשמתי ועל התנא דעיר בבי חמוהי. Is this one of the ones you added? I don't remember learning this.
It could be. That's why I say I'm not sure it was in the second source. Yeah.
It's
a Gemara. It's also found in Kedushin Daf Yud Gimel. But that wasn't in my original source sheet either. But this is
so why don't you take us through it, each one.
Okay. Rav. So Rav is mangid. It means he's like it was so angry.
He would flog, I think.
Oh, he would flog. Thank you. He would flog. So here, help me out, Asher. He would flog anybody that was mekadesh with bia. That would get that would mekadesh somebody with bia, and he would also flog anybody demanda mekadesh b'shuka, anybody that got married in the shuk, in the thoroughfare. In other words, not in a formal place. Uman de mekadesh below shiduche, a man anybody who was mekadesh without shiduchi. What do it mean shiduchi?
I think some kind of a shtar lifnei, like an agreement before. So like it may be. I'm wondering if maybe it's even doing it on just finding a bride on his own instead of the proper being set up.
So I was bothered by what exactly this is. So I looked in Steinsaltz, and what he said is that shiduche means without talking to the woman beforehand. In other words, just meeting her and marrying her, which I might say some Hasidim do. Well, they have shidduchim, but no, and they take that back. Meeting her he says, without talking to her first. In other words, you don't have to, no contract, no shtar, but just marrying her blind.
That would be a problem if you look at Yitzchak Avinu. He saw Rivka, she fell off the camel, she brought her into his mother's tent, and with that made her his wife.
Yeah, well, right. Yeah, he says, Steinsaltz says, without talking to her first. Maybe they talked a little bit.
An actual practical question: what happened to couples that don't speak the same language?
They shouldn't be getting married. They should not be getting married.
It happens.
No, Asher.
It does happen a lot.
I didn't say it doesn't. I said it shouldn't.
No,
what was the question? I didn't hear the question.
So what happened to couples that don't speak the same language?
Are you saying they can't talk to each other?
Yeah, no, they don't speak the same language. They don't share a common language. So would that be considered below shiduche?
I wouldn't say that. I would not say that.
Why not?
I assume that they would talk. I assume that they have some talking going on. You mean they don't have any language together at all?
It happens a lot. I know at least 2-3 couples like that.
Okay, let's go further. Come on, Rabbi. And then you're going to have to give us a tzad shava in all these cases.
Okay. The next one is Uman de Mevatel Gita. who cancels a letter of divorce. I guess he sends the divorce and then he cancels it in his mind, or I don't know. He says it's no longer valid. But he says in front of 280 it's no longer valid. But then the woman's going to get it, But then she's going to think she's divorced, but she's not divorced. Uman de master moda'ah agita, a person who made a declaration about a get. What does that mean?
Like he announced he was going to give a get. Like he made public. He hasn't actually given it, but he said that he's going to.
Okay.
Okay.
But, one thing I saw, it says it's telling at least 3 people is one of the Hirushim that I saw.
Telling 3 people. Okay.
Right.
Uman de pakir shlicha de Rabbanan, a man who embarrasses maybe the shliach of the rabbis, or treats him badly. The rabbi sent a shliach to him maybe, and he insults him. And the next one is interesting. Man de shahi shmata shamta de Rabbanan ale taltin yomin velo ati de beidina. This is actually very important. This is a person who allows a ban to be placed upon him. In other words, once a ban having been placed upon him by the rabbis, a shamta is a ban. If it's been 30 days, taltin yoma velo ati de beidina. In other words, if the rabbis have put a ban on you, you have to come before them within 30 days and to resolve it. In other words, let's say the classic case would be like you are not giving a get to your wife, and the rabbis put a ban on you. So you have to come. You could be Rav would flog you if you didn't come within 30 days. Yeah. It's not just like, oh, I'll live in a van. I won't go to shul. And I'll just live like that. No, you have to come to the rabbis. What is vitava vitava l'shmata? That's the continuation. And he inquires about the shmata. Val chatana didar bebei chamuhi. The chatan who lives in his father-in-law's house. Now that's a big one because lots of chatanim live in their father-in-law's house, but and in fact the halacha talks about this, that people do this. So, but there you can clearly see that it's I don't know what's the problem with that. What would the problem be with that?
Is the idea that that's before the marriage is complete?
Yes, right.
Yeah.
That's what it is. Yeah.
In other words, he's living there, and things might happen, but they shouldn't be.
So, what's the side of shove in all these cases? At least the first group and the last one.
Well, right. So there's certainly a certain amount of preetzus going on.
Yeah. Okay.
But.
Mm-hmm.
It's
These are
also
things that are all technically legitimate.
I think it's a little bit deeper. I think they're all things that are like disrespect for rabbinical ordinances. In other words, it seems almost like it's not like Rav is saying, I forbid you to marry with Bia. It seems like there's already a known prohibition on marrying Bia, and he's just saying you have violated these rabbinic laws, so I'm going to whip you.
But that's just an authoritarian or a legalism construct. I mean, there has to be content to it also. And we said earlier about preachers fits.
Right.
I mean, it's an immediate infatuation. So they get married in the shuk. And the shuk means the shuk. And they get married in the shuk. It's like, there's no context. It's going to lead to disaster. Same thing with shidduchei leads to disaster. Right.
Right.
So
these are all things that I guess are also permitted according to the Torah, really.
Right.
That the rabbis felt are problematic to do these things.
And that goes back to Asher. We had our Av and Ima got married immediately, right? Without Shidduchei. So they did, it's mutter. But now this is being canceled.
Well, within the
here you're flogged because you're endangering the social order, and I think that's the bottom of it. It's not because you're disrespecting Chachamim, it's because you're like endangering the social order that was created by Chachamim.
Okay, I'll take that.
I can live with that.
And I find it fascinating that they put sexual morality and obedience to the rabbi on the same level, but that's a different debate.
I don't know it's that they're putting them on the same level, sort of in every case, but this is a group of cases that is about both sexual morality and the respecting the rabbinic decrees made about that topic, right? So it's not that they're saying like in general we treat those as the same thing. It's just like there are rabbinic decrees about sexual morality. We take them very seriously. If you mess up.
So what is how would you explain the one that disrespects the shaliach of the Rabbanan? Like that has nothing to do in this case, right?
I mean, I think it might be linked to the get case. I actually thought about that. So I thought that maybe part of what's going on is that like the shaliach, disrespecting the shaliach of the Rabbanan is like, it can be lots of cases when the shaliach is doing stuff, but I wondered if it was imagining a case that was like the shaliach of the Beit Din is like taking the get to someplace or another or something like that. I don't believe your chain of custody of the get. Yeah. I think your get's made up, something like that.
I think you may be right, but often in the list there's an outlier, that they threw in because it fits, kind of. So.
Well, if you take what Sarah says, and you also take what I said about the Shamta being about Aguna, then all of these things actually have to do with marriage.
Right.
They all have to do with marriage and not screwing up the traditional family, not letting a woman think she's divorced when she's not divorced, not not giving her a get when you're supposed to give her a get, keeping the order of marriage is integral.
Certainly, you're right. Certainly the thing with the get cases are all like evil men. It's like evil things they're doing. I mean, the divorce is on its way, that it's canceled. I mean, it's like so terrible. But I agree with you that it fits that social order deal.
It's a strengthening of, the Republicans would like this law, the law of strengthening marriage, we could call it. I'm just saying they're all have to do with giving more chizuk to marriage.
Okay.
Whatever. I have no comments about modern life. I'm just saying there was a concern then about about marriage being not being kept properly. Marriage is people. It's the most traumatic thing in a person's life in marriage. Yeah, Sarah.
I wonder whether it's less like the social institution and more about protecting women, dafka. So if you read the Veloshi Duche as the way Steinsaltz does, which had not occurred to me, but is about like not talking to her in advance. Then we've got the horrible like get refuser type version, right? Like he's mevatel the get, all of those things. And even the one of like staying in the father-in-law's house seems to like, I don't know, maybe it puts her in some sort of complicated position where she feels like she's like not able to, maybe not able to say no to him, but she knows that it's asur, like, or you're just like, I don't know. I think there are ways to construct that.
You're right. I think you're right. It's also protecting, you say it's protecting women.
It's protecting, right. And it's protecting against a very specific kind of like abuse.
Even Mekadesh Babia.
Even Mekadesh Babia is like, I don't know.
He would go to the woman and say, "Oh, listen, it's mutter. It's totally mutter." But it's like, she's like, "Really?" And he's like, "Yeah,
right."
Totally.
Right. I mean, I think generally like the consent, what it means for her to consent to Kiddush Bia is like really complicated. So then that also seems like it's sort of part of it. So it's, I mean, I don't know, maybe it is a kind of like, strengthening of the institution of marriage, but I wonder if it's actually just like, we're worried about.
I like your explanation better. I think
Well, so I agree also, but they see, and they come together. There's several. Here,
I mean, one hopes.
You hope. I'll give you another one comes together. This, what we have here, what we hear is Rav trying to create mention. Men are here are wild and all within, but they're doing it within the halacha, and they're very willing to go according to the halacha as long as they can get into their beloved's pants as fast as possible, and they're following halacha. And he's saying, "I'm going to make you into a mention." I don't. In other words, this all works together. When it works together.
In addition to that, though, they're also trying to avoid mamzerin. The whole thing with giving a get and taking it away, or saying I'm going to give a get then not giving the get. You have a woman who thinks she has a get, she goes and gets married, and then all of a sudden you got a whole problem that's going to last for many, many, many generations.
Yeah.
And I think that's also a lot of what's going on through a lot of these floggings.
So let's go back and look at Dalit again and understand it in light of what we just read. So we're back to the Shulchan Aruch, and let me change the stop share here. And what do we have? We have Haisha. No, that was. Why did I? Where is this coming up? Right. Haisha mikadesh b'shoshat drachim b'kesef v'shtar b'bia min Torah. Aval chachamim asru likadesh b'bia. That's what we just saw. Mishum pritzis. V'mavar v'kidesh b'bia makinoto maket mardu. Well, that's the mangin. That's the mangin.
Right.
V'hi mikudeshet. But of course it works. V'hi mikudeshet. I wonder if you shake a lulav on Shabbat, do you say the you did the bracha? Do you say the bracha? Did you do the mitzvah?
Is it a bracha Torah?
Yeah, you say the bracha.
Yeah, right.
In other words, I'm doing the mitzvah. Okay, the rabbis are going to are angry at me, but I did the mitzvah.
So I am not allowed to tell you yes, which I'd like to, because you go ahead and do it. So it's usher for me to say yes.
Yeah.
Because I'm a noble like you go ahead and do it.
Right.
The rabbi said you became a mitzvah.
Who do you listen to, God or the rabbis?
They're not the same person. I mean,
okay.
they seem to put them equally, at least in the Shulchan Aruch, right? God says something through the Torah, and then the rabbi comes and they're like, forget about it. That's not how we operate around.
Ultimately, we're the religion of the rabbis. We're not the religion of the Torah. I mean, the Torah is the basis of the rabbinic religion, but we're the religion of the rabbis.
Or if you ate tray food as a seudat mitzvah on Shabbat, you have to have another seudah afterward with kosher food.
Are you yotze? Ain't a mitzvah baba vera. That's a two derisas that you're talking about. It's like the chassid. There's a joke about this. The chassid who it's raining in the sukkah and he goes into the sukkah in the pouring rain and says the kiddush, and the litvach says to him, you're pater from the sukkah. It's mitzvah pater. So let's say I'm saying kiddush inside. It says yes, but I'm doing the mitzvah sukkah. He's saying, but you're pater. But I don't bother with halacha. I'm doing the mitzvah. Anyway, afilu kidsha bekesef or b'shtar. So we say, makinoto makut mardut, vehi mekudesh. Afilu kidsha bekesef or b'shtar, imlo shidech techila. Oh, that's the other thing, shidech. That Rav said. Imlo shidech techila, o shekidesh b'shuk. We also saw that. Makinoto makut mardut, vehi mekudesh. But it works. So, right, you need shidduchim, but like I said, it's just talking to her, meeting her. I would even say it's meeting her.
So outside of the proper context of an arranged situation, where there is some sort of understanding between two parties that they're meeting up for the purposes of getting married. And the majority of people probably not getting together like that. Are they meeting themselves derech agav or just because they're at a party together?
Right. Well, I like
But
this.
technically, those relationships, even if they end up in kiddushin, could be makim maldum. I mean, not that we hold like
why?
that,
but they met each other. I don't
theoretically.
understand. They had a shidduch. The shidduch was that they met each other.
No, but the shidduch wasn't. They met each other, but they weren't brought into a situation by a third party. But I think it's a proper arrangement of how to.
I'm going with the Steinsaltz and saying that's not what the halacha is. When it says shidduch, it doesn't mean that it's a third party. It means that there was some time in which they met.
No, but there has to be a formal arrangement. There has to be recognition. I personally believe that the whole reason for shidduch is to bring two people together for the formal notion of entering into kiddushin. I don't believe it's just that some two people met at a party. I don't think that qualifies as a shidduch.
Do we have any achronim on what this phrasing is? Like what shidduch, like how, besides Steinsaltz, I guess he's an achron.
He's definitely an achron, yeah. Not a rishon. I don't know. Yeah, that was the best I found. And I thought that that's good enough for me. Certainly a learned Talmud Chacham. But yeah, I think that shidduchi means meeting each other. It doesn't mean you had to have a shadchanit. I don't think it means that.
In the Gemara, it's important to note that Nardoi says the makat mardut is only for the is for Makadesh Rabia alone. And some include Shiduche, whatever that means, Mishum Pritzes. That's what I can tell you. I have a note that I wrote to myself a long time ago.
Right. There's the Gemara goes on. I didn't bring you the whole Gemara. The Gemara goes on that says in Narada they didn't do it for many of these things. I think maybe only for Bia. But let's look at
the formal setting is with the shidduch, and the informal setting is the shuk. That's how I kind of put it in my head together. But obviously, there's.
You're right. Except delete the word informal and put out the chaos. It's chaotic. That's why you can't do it in Kiddush either. In Shabbos.
Okay. Let's just see the Ramah. The Ramah goes on and he says.
Also, I want you to know, as far as I understand, every Horab basin that I've seen a couple. How the truth of how they learn it. The mashmos is that you're maka the man and not the woman, even though she may have been a participant in the Easter or a willing participant, but the man is the one who received the makos.
Because he's the active one participant.
He's the moving. He's moving.
Yeah. But look at the Ramah. The Ramah makes it all much lighter. He says, "Yesh omrim she'ein makin im kidesh bekesef o b'shtar afilu b'shuk ubelo kiddushin ubelo shiduchin." In other words, tur b'shem harosh. So, in other words, we're left with just mikadesh b'bia getting malchut, but the shiduchim is not punished. V'lo ra'iti. And then he goes on, "V'lo ra'iti miyamai shahaku mi shekidesh below shiduchim." I never heard or I never saw anybody in my life being whipped for the crime of marrying without a shiduchim.
Well, he wouldn't have because you can't do that with Sanhedrin anyway. So where would he have seen that?
Makat mardus can be done. Makas mardus can be done by any authorized basin.
Yeah. They had.
And then bringing an authorized basing after to your neighborhood soon.
You're going to remember that Jewish people were under self-rule for 1,500 years. You know, when the Jewish,
but like not in Sephardic lands where they
okay, yeah. I didn't say all Jewish people, but you're right. I'm talking about in Europe, the Jewish people were left to their own rules, and they're based, and they even you had to pay money to the Jewish community in Belgium and maybe Holland too. You still are required by law to be, I think in Belgium, not in Holland. In Belgium, you're required to be a member of a community, either the Christian or the Jewish. So all the Jews, however irreligious, are paying to be members of the community. And that dates back to the medieval custom of there being a separate government for the Jews, by the Jews, where they collected taxes and they could whip people. So yeah, I think the Ramah is saying that they did whip some people, but nobody for this crime. All right, so let's take a break now. When we come back, we'll look at the Rav Moshe tshuva. We're a little bit late on our break, but we'll come back for the tshuva of Rav Moshe from my source sheet.
Okay.
Very good. What time should we be back?
Let's come back in like 5 minutes.
Awesome.
Okay, so we're back and we're going to look at the tshuva of Rav Moshe. Which tshuva is it? It's in the source sheet that I sent out. It's Igros Moshe Ibn HaEzer Chelik Aleph Siman Ayin Vav. So Sarah, why don't you start reading that?
Okay. B'davar shenit kasha etzel reform rabbi. Yud bet Marchashvan Tafshin Yud Zayin, which
right. He doesn't want to call them a rab. He doesn't want to call them a rav, so he calls them a rabbi like that.
Rabbi, I love it. Okay.
72 years ago.
Right. This is this is be 1957.
Yeah. Okay. בדבר האישה שנישאת אחד אצל רפורם רבי, וכל האנשים שהיו בעת הנישואין היו כולם רשעים ומופקרים לחלל שבת ולעבור על כל מצוות התורה, והסעודה הייתה מבשר נבלות וטרפות, וכולן אכלו ועתה אחרי עבור איזה זמן הלך הבעל ממנה, ואי אפשר להשיג ממנו גט פוטרין, אם יש להתירה לעלמא, משום שלא היו קדושין כדין התורה.
What does la'alma mean?
Like to permit her to marry other people.
Exactly, right. To the world.
As in our people, I think, is part of it, right?
Well, yeah, right.
Like those people, our people.
Well, it's an interesting world. It's an interesting world that he's describing because they're reformed, they're eating treifas and not keeping Shabbos, but they want to get. In other words, I don't know if that's, in other words, they want an Orthodox get. They want to get from this Orthodox rabbi.
But maybe whoever sends him this question presumably is in the situation of trying to figure out whether he can marry her to some.
Right.
Whether she can, right, whether,
Right.
Right.
It could be that she married someone from her.
Yeah, she gets a divorce from this guy, and then I don't know, she decides that she's gonna marry this person,
or maybe there was
right to Ramosha, and Ramosha.
Or this could be a cousin who's trying to get the guy. It's a family. There could be all sorts of. You're right, sir. How you said it, but I'm saying it could be all sorts of ways.
Yeah, it's right. I mean, I'm sure there's some, someone's like, oh my goodness, and my relatives all becoming
right.
But it just seems like the simple case is she wants to marry someone else.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And you can't find the guy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
But she's come to a presumably Orthodox rabbi to get permission to marry.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, whatever.
Well, Zara B'shuva, I don't know. It's not such a.
Yeah. Right. Well. Right. He doesn't say. He would normally say that in the whatever. Okay, it's not important.
Could have been a mixed couple. She was religious. He was reformed. They decided to get married together at a reform show. Whatever.
Well, I think that certain things were still. I think that maybe part of the answer is that a get was still considered important to get, and even if they ate treifas, in other words, they still had traditional values in some extent, in certain aspects.
That's right, but you might imagine. I mean, I think the reform movement was gave Gittin according to their own procedures in the 50s.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think.
Well, I feel
some did, some did not.
Right. I feel like it's probably coming from it not being so common, and presumably a big underlying factor is that he knows it's not at least overwhelmingly common and wants there to not be a bunch of mamzerim being created everywhere.
Right. But it's also common enough that you need to be worried about there being a bunch of mamzerim everywhere. So therefore you're going to say there's no problem. Like, nothing to see here, folks, right? There was no kiddushin at all, right? If you think this is a really rare case, then maybe you won't be as freaked out by the mamzer problem as like if you think actually this is happening all the time, which is like by the 50s in America was happening pretty often, I think.
Yeah.
The direction the Rav Moshe is going in right now in the early 50s was terribly, I mean, terribly is the wrong word, very strongly criticized by many Orthodox Rabbanim, by many other poskim who said, look, she's married. She's living with this guy. They don't have a get, you know, and Rav Moshe says, well, so what's the answer? They don't have an answer. We don't have an answer. So I'm just saying what we know Rav Moshe from the end of his career. But in 57, Rav Moshe was also going on trips to California to raise money, you know, for his yeshiva. I mean, he was, you know, what I'm saying is he wasn't what he was at the end, which I'm kind of, and it was kind of a very strong statement on his part.
Okay, go on.
הנכון לעניות דעתי שאין הקידושין שהיו אצל רפורם רבי כלום, אם נתברר היטב שלא היו שם עדים כשרים, שראו נתינת טבעת ואמרתו הרי את מקודשת לי. So it seems to me that if there was no kiddushin there, as long as you can prove that there were no kosher edim who saw it happen. ואפילו היו שני כשרים שעמדו מרחוק ולא ראו שאם היה זה ברב כשר מומחה שסידר הקידושין ובטבעת זימן עדים קרובים ובטעות, right, okay, זימן עדים כשרים להיות עדי קידושין איתה
Krovim. He brought
Krovim, I see. He asked people who were
relatives. He said, "Oh, relatives. You're the brother. You're the brother of the Chatan.
You're the brother. Come do it.
Come do it. It's an honor. You be the aide."
Yeah,
right.
There's actually a story that in the kibbutzim, some Orthodox rabbis in Israel were afraid that they were not, even though they were marrying, the marriages were all sham and they weren't really keeping their monogamy. And therefore, they wanted to make the marriages not kosher, and so they would actually do that. They would actually bring in the brother. Oh, you be the aide, and you to actually ruin the wedding intentionally.
Right. Okay. Isabel.
Do you have a source on that you can send out? That's wild.
Yeah, I've heard it a long time ago.
No, it's true. No, it's true, but usually it was something smaller. In other words, they try to find some way. If they had to be mafkir, overturn the wedding, they would find a way to overturn.
No, I'm saying
usually is more subtle, but not always.
I'm saying lechatchila.
Not always.
I'm saying not. I would say lechatchila they would not turn over. They lechatchila wanted to puzzle the wedding.
Yeah.
Anyway, go on. Wait. So what's his ta'ut? So why is he mentioning his ta'ut?
Because then presumably in
other words, he was a Rav Mumche, but
he was a Rav Mumche. He was trying to do the right thing, but he got confused and he asked the brother or whatever. So there,
because that's a case, I think he's going to bring a Gemara, right? That actually happened. Ita b'chatam sofer.
Right. Ita b'chatam sofer. Siman such and such. Shehem kedushim gemurim. So the chatam sofer says that works. In a case where it was a Rav Mumcha who asked the wrong people. Umidina lo tarich like sha'od hapam mitam de haksherim shahayu af shelo ra'u velo sham'u ma'aseh hakdushim harei yodim ba'umdana demochach. Right. So the Chatam Sofer is able to say this is okay because there were other people there watching, even if they were there from afar. They obviously knew what was going on, and then they must have known.
So even though the two witnesses who were appointed were Krovim, there were other kosher people who watched. So he's saying, so why not say the same here? In this whole crowd of Reform people, there must have been two people who were kosher, and they were far away. They didn't see, just like this case in the Chatam Sofer. But we can say, Anan Sahadi, which is a famous concept. We are certain, it's like we are in place of Eidim. We rabbis are like the Eidim, and we're saying that there were Eidim there because there were those two people there, even though they didn't actually see, but the event happened and they knew the event happened. So it's like there were two witnesses.
Right. But in our case, presumably he's going to say
that presumably in our case it's not going to be like that.
In our case that doesn't work, right? Barur pashut she'al rasha mea reformer shesider hakadushin leka anan saadeh shena'asu ma'aseh kadushin v'nitina miyad oliyada ve'amira sharei kol rabbi ha-reformer oseh is a ma'aseh sheboda milibo.
Right.
Right.
Every rabbi Reform, he invents some new thing that he wants to do. Oh, this time we're going to do a two-ring ceremony. This time we're going to do something different. And
right.
And,
so we can't assume that we know what's going on because every time it's different.
Right. Whereas this case of Chatam Sofer was a mumche who did everything according to the book. Just one mistake.
Right. Okay. Ve'omer shezehu kedushin. All right. Ve'en kan afilu mala'at achazok matzinu bekutim umimela ha'anashim shelo ra'u velo sham'u ma'aseh hakadushin af sheyodim ma'aseh harabbi sham ma'aseh shekore oto kadushin einan edim shena'aseh ma'aseh kiddushay haTorah. So even if there are people there who know what this rabbi is going to do because they've like seen him do it before.
No, I don't think that's what he's saying. I think he's saying they know that what he's doing he calls kiddushin. They know. That is, they know in general that this was a kiddushin that happened.
But they don't know what it actually is.
Yeah, they can't know what it is because who knows what it was.
Because he does it every time, differently every time.
Yeah.
Right, so it wasn't kiddushay haTorah, which I think is like interesting language.
Right.
Especially given all the like stuff we were just talking about like rabbinic reimagining.
Right, about Bia, but right. Okay, but yeah, go on.
No, yeah, he doesn't want to say that because he doesn't let himself open to it's only Drabbana, Kiddushay Torah, and then it's scorched earth. That's it. There's nothing there.
He doesn't say, well, maybe this one Reform rabbi. Notice what he's doing though. He doesn't say maybe this one Reform rabbi was really knew what he was doing and really did it right. Mm-hmm. But he's saying. Even if that's true, let me add a little bit to what he's saying to defend him. He's saying, even if that's true, we certainly can't say Anan Sahadi that was true. We can't create 100% that he was kosher. In fact, he probably wasn't. So we don't have the right to create Anan Sahadi here. So therefore, we have no witnesses.
But it seems like you would leave yourself open. If you have that logic, you would leave yourself open to like testimony about a given case where you can say, oh, well, I know.
Well, then he is. I think he is leaving himself open to that.
Right? I know that these two ksherim were there.
Yeah. Like and no, not only that. I know the two ksherim he's willing to say maybe there really were. But the event, you'd have to have two witnesses to know, I saw what happened at the wedding. And the rabbi really did give them
sitting in the front row.
I think he's basically like, there's unlikely that it was simultaneously the real actions of Kedushin and everything that would constitute that, and that there were two ksherim who were able to properly.
Right, exactly.
Well, he also later on adds a point which I don't think is here, and the point that Rav Moshe adds in a lot of the sucking situations that I knew of. He made that, I think it's in the Chuvas. He says that that Dafka, if they use the Lashon Kedas Moshe v'Yisrael, it's Mevutal, because no one would say that this, under its auspices, is Kedas Moshe v'Yisrael. And he has that Dafka to find that absolute unclosable loophole, or he's attempting to. Okay. I'm sorry. Af
im irasha asa benitina v'amira kadin. Aval ein tzarech lekach ve'uvda zo shelo hayu sham klal ezim ksherin. Right? We don't have to go into this whole question because there were no kosher eating there at all. V'lachein barur shemitzad ma'aseh kedushim shehaya sham lo nitkasha klal ve'ein lachush l'klal. Ach sheyesh ladun al ma שדרו ביחד, כדרך איש ואשתו, אם הייתה דירתם במקום שנמצאו יהודים כשרים. Right, so now we have a different problem. Even if there were no kosher eating at the wedding, they live in a Jewish neighborhood, everybody knows they're the husband and wife, they're ksherim who see that. Mitam hein hein edei yichud hein hein edei bia, ve'ein bo'el bi'ilat znut, ve'gamar u'ba'al l'shem kedushin. Wait.
So just review that because this reviews our previous week's classes.
Right. So you might think that those Adim that were willing to use the principle and
the witnesses, the neighbors are witnesses to yichud. They know that these people are living together. That's yichud. And we have this principle that when you have edei yichud, that's also edei bia, and that we can apply that here. And we also can apply the rule of whenever a person does bila, he does it not for znut, but for kiddushin. So all the time that they've been having relations, that's been kiddushin.
Doesn't he have to assume, though, that there would be kosher witnesses in the area? And if we're talking about a very non-religious, no, but we're saying, if we're talking about a tray-feeding couple, then why would we assume they live in a frum area? Or they live in an area where they're from people living in them?
So redlining in 1956, very common.
That look at this in America, we look to what neighborhoods they lived in. Seriously.
And he's not assuming anything here. He's not assuming. Right. He says, Im hayta diratam b'makom. If their dira was in a place where there were kosher Jews, then we have a question. That's all he's saying.
Right. They followed this. The 18 follows this.
Aval pashut shehu rakesh yesh lomar adam yodea shelo hayu kedushin klum amrinan debal achar kach l'shem kedushin. So this only would apply in a case where he thinks that there
was no kedushin,
that there was no initial kedushin, because why would he be having sex with his wife l'shem kedushin if he's already done kedushin? That's strange,
right? And that's the big issue, right?
Right. Although you weren't at the beginning of Shira last week, 2 weeks ago, weren't you sort of floating this far that actually maybe all the guys in Kedushin?
I was definitely. I was saying, well, maybe I was floating the idea that when you're with your husband, you're with him under the presumption that you're married. So, you're doing this because you're married. So wouldn't that be called the shame Kedushin? But we came away from that.
There's a famous story about this. A certain Talmud who became a big Rosh Yeshiva went to Reb Chaim of Brisk. He gave exactly that shita, or close enough to that shita. So therefore, isn't Kiddushin a continuous activity? And Reb Chaim says, I don't follow the Svora, but Mazel Tov, Mazel Tov.
That's great. Okay. In other words,
it's dafka because he thought that he had Kiddushin, because he thought the Reform rabbi did Kiddushin, because the Reform rabbi pulled the wool over his eyes and told him, this is Kiddushin. So therefore his Bia now doesn't do his Kiddushin. That's the way he's going to say it, I think. Yeah.
Right. But I guess my question is, the husband might not believe that. The husband might think I had because I don't know, maybe he doesn't know from Kiddushin at all. He just knows that this is like what a wedding is. And I just said the things they told me to say.
Right. So he thinks he's married, but he does think he's married. And then some crazy Orthodox rabbi comes and says, actually, you're not married yet. When you go to with your wife, just think that you're having relations with her until you're marrying her. Crazy rabbi, if that crazy rabbi didn't say that to him that night, then
no, then he would have just gone about his business. Okay.
Then he would have just gone about his business. He's not thinking he's getting married. He thinks he's married. He thinks he's with his wife now.
Yeah. It's also just relevant to me that it seems like also her intention would be relevant, but okay, that's for another time. Diktubot daf ein gimel. Adam yodea she'in kedushin tofsim bepachot mishavei pruta. Vegamar uba l'shem kedushin. Right. So the case in Ketubot is he knows that he didn't do real kiddushin with less than shavei pruta. Therefore, when he had sex, he obviously did it l'shem kiddushin.
Now, there's some guy married with less than shavei pruta, so he knows that, and he intended that this first relations. But that's only because he knows that, and then he changes his kavana to this kavana of kiddushin in his bia. Okay.
Well, hasuver in adam yodea she'in kiddushin tofsim bepachot mishavei pruta amrinan dechi kabal adata de kiddushin harishonim baal v'chein amrinan hatam bekiddushay ketana she'im ein adam yodea adata kiddushin harishonim baal. Right. So if you had kiddushin, if you did kiddushin while she's still a katana, and then later she grows up, and you know that the kiddushin when she was a katana doesn't really work, then you would obviously have in mind that you're doing it l'shem kiddushin now. I think is that right?
Wait. Let's explain this thing. V'lahasover. What does that mean? V'lahasover. The one who thinks we're talking about a Gemara that we didn't see. V'lahasover ein adam yodea she'ein kiddushin tofsim b'pachot misheva pruta.
Right. So there's some people think that a person, that we can't assume that a person knows that the kiddushin weren't tofsim for less than shavei pruta.
So in that case, Amrina and the ki kabal, that when he had relations, adaita the kiddushin harishona bal, then he's only thinking, he thinks that he did get married already, and his kiddush and his bia that he's doing now is al dat the kiddushin harishona, and therefore he's not doing kiddushin now. That's the key point.
Right. And that's what allows him to say, obviously, this guy got married in the Reform wedding.
And this guy is in that second category. Right.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Right.
So
he takes like what's a sort of like baseline, like a debate about what our presumption is about his psychology. And the Gemara just be like, well, obviously, we're in the second category now. Okay. Oh, sorry. V'chein amrinan hatam de kiddushay ketana she'im ein adam yodea adata kiddushin harishonim ba'al. So, and we say the same thing about if you did kiddushin with a katana, that if the person doesn't know that the kiddushin aren't really tosfin when she's still a child, then obviously when he has sex with her, he must be doing so, having assumed that he's already married to her.
Right. He's disproving Rav Nachum. He is disproving my theory that every bia is kiddushin. He's saying, no, we have Gemaras that prove that otherwise.
Okay.
Well, go ahead.
V'zehu barur she'ilu holchim elu haholchim lereform rabbi, so v'rim b'da'atam hato'eh shehem kiddushin. And obviously the people who go to Reform rabbis must wrongly think that this is kiddushin.
Otherwise they wouldn't go there, right?
Otherwise they wouldn't do it. Which is like it's a fascinating svara because it assumes kiddushin, like it's treating kiddushin as like a general notion of marriage as opposed to a specific halachic concept. Because obviously, right?
Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, there's a question there. Okay. No,
but you're right, because they have a concept of kiddushin and they thought they did it, right? And there is kiddushin out there.
Kiddushin is marriage, not like.
Right. Well, the Rambam, we see that from the Rambam. We see that from the Rambam. When the Rambam says originally people would get married. Wait a minute. What do you mean originally people get married? Isn't marriage a Torah and just a defined thing? No. Marriage is a thing in the world. The Torah then comes and addresses that thing and gives it certain structure for Jews. But
right. So then couldn't you say like, oh, these people who go to the Reform rabbi, they don't think they're doing kiddushin at all. They just think they're getting married, like in a sort of like Jewishly.
Well, but then they certainly don't think
that allows them to get married in, I don't know, wherever suburban 1950s place they live in.
No, but he's using the word kiddushin here.
We had a Jewish marriage. That's what they'll tell you.
Yeah, we had a Jewish marriage, right? Okay.
Yeah, but
they think they're married. He's using the word kiddushin to mean the general
to mean married, as opposed to being a technical halachic category. Which is just
yes, he's saying they think they got married and they didn't.
And
therefore, they're not trying to get married with this bia. Right,
because they've already done it. Okay.
Yeah, go on.
וכל שכן שיותר נוטה שבאלו המפוקרים לעבור על כל איסורי התורה, לא אמרינן בהו אין עושה בעילתו בעילתנות, כשיטת הריvash.
Right, rivash. Or I would just say the Ravid also seems to say that. In other words, that we don't apply this rule of ein adam oseh bilato bilatznuts except by people who are careful about these things, but by these what he calls mufkarim, people who are fraya yid, who are not careful about mitzvot. Why should we make that rule anyway?
Right. I feel like in one of the tshuvot about like Soviet civil marriage, he has this amazing comparison where he says, well, the rivash, when he's talking about like Maranos, is talking about a place where like the Goyish marriage is really serious because like Catholics don't do divorce, but by us, obviously, it's like everybody does whatever. So because we have divorce, like spelled out divorce with a dollar. Okay. V'chein pasak harama b'siman kaf zayin mechaber b'siman kuf mem tet seif vav. Ach af im nachmir lo shayach kan she'af b'ksherim ki hagavna she'en yodea lo amrinan sheba l'shem kedushin ela al dat kedushin harishonim v'lachein ein tzarich get umutar la'alma. Moshe Feinstein.
He says, so what do you mean? What does it mean? Ach im nachmir. Nachmir about what?
About ein adam oseh bilato bilatznuts.
Right. So we'll say no. Actually, even here he is doing it l'shem kedushin. Lo shayach kan she'af b'ksherim k'ki hagav. Even if you be from she'ein yodea, but when he doesn't know that his kedushin she'ein yodea, when he doesn't know this kedushin wasn't real, lo amrin sheba l'shem kedushin, like he said before.
He's right. He's just going back to the previous.
Yeah, he's just throwing in that this is like an extra little sneef, an extra added aspect to why you might matter, because maybe none of his bias are bias kedushin. And then he retreats. Says, well, even if you would say that it is kedushin, well, I still have what I said before, that he's al dat harishon, ela al der kedushin harishon. V'lechen ein tzarich get umuteret la'alma. So this is like, I mean, it's a serious thing to matir a woman without a get. And he's just, I think that's part of the reason why he uses such strong language against the reform. He wants to really bury them. He wants to really bury them and paint them in a certain light that they are completely not connected with Torah, because otherwise, because he's creating a tremendous heter here. And if he doesn't want to leave any room for somebody to say, well, how do maybe they don't even start entertaining even the possibility that they could have maybe done it right. So he first says, no, they're all wrong. Everything they do is crazy. So then it's obvious that it's nothing. Then it's obvious that she can go marry somebody else.
I like to add that he signs Yedido because the one he wrote to was actually an old Rav. Every city, when I was growing up in the 50s and 60s, every city seemed to have a good beis din with a big Talmid Chacham who recognized that you had to solve situations. And I can go from city to city. I used to know in every city. And it was certainly true in Chicago. It was certainly true in LA when I was on the beis din. And in some cases, it was really interesting. The Av beis din sometimes in other areas was extraordinarily, I shouldn't use extraordinary, but very sociable with Reform rabbis. In other words, the Av beis din in Chicago used to go on the yearly trip to Eretz Yisrael of the Federation. He would sit and he'd go with the Reform rabbis. He was a big Talmid Chacham, and he was using Rav Moshe's psak all the time. And I was already living in Eretz Yisrael. I came to one of the meetings, and someone got up. Reform rabbi said, we learned in class, you're using the Feinstein document how can you, Feinstein, that also made me cringe for a moment. How can you use the Feinstein document and when we have such love from Rabbi Hartman, who loves us, and you guys, with Feinstein, you hate us. And basically this rabbi said, look, I have to answer questions about families and about status, and I'm not pointing fingers, but I got to solve the problem. And that's where they all got on the bus together. Rabbis know how to do these things, time later on. But it was an interesting moment. Rabbi Danzig, yeshakayach to you.
Shakar to you, Shakar to all of the participants. Very interesting shir, I hope. Next week we'll go on to Kaf Zayin.
Amen.
One thing, I remember, I know that in the UK, if they know that the couple have been living together and did have to get married and reform, sure, they will say, get the Khumrah. They're not comfortable to say, nah, we'll tell about Allah. They're not comfortable to say it like that.
Well, the reform movement in America is more
it's slightly different. Yeah.
Is different and is
North America.
Yeah. I mean the Sefer
United States.
Makor Baruch, he talks even about German rabbis, how each rabbi in the reform movement in Germany, 150 years ago, would try to come up with a new novel thing to do, a new different to sort of, impress people with his creativity. So I don't think that was going on so much in England, in the reform movement. I think it's more traditional. It's not even called reform in England. I think it's called something else.
No, it's called reform.
Oh, it's called reform.
Yeah. It's just, I don't know. They always say the reform in the UK is more like the conservative movement in America.
Exactly, right.
But I don't know.
Now, I'm saying that might be, if the base in England is more, it doesn't want to rely on this tshuva, it might be because of that reason, because they're more.
No, I just think that they know the couple have lived together, and that most people will tend to live in an area in London or Manchester that is close to a Jewish community.
Yeah, but look, Rav Moshe is saying it doesn't matter because the first bia was first bia was not for the Shem Kiddushin, because they thought they're already married. And therefore you could watch them together, living together 100 years, wouldn't do anything. And it could be 100 kosher Jews watching them. It wouldn't do anything if they thought they were already married and they weren't.
Mm.
So you'd have to have that initial marriage be, according to Rav Moshe, have something kosher about it. Have two witnesses that watched an actual pruta being exchanged, being given.
Quick question, Rav Nachum. As it relates to like the traditional, like get on your knees, give your wife the ring, wouldn't that be considered kiddushin to a certain extent? Because he really says it. He said, "Would you marry me?" And then
that is a big problem. That is a big problem. You really shouldn't do that.
But I'm saying that as it relates to like a reform and like that they're not married.
Well, I mean, first of all, if you did that without witnesses, then you again wouldn't be anything, right? If you go to the top of, if you go to the the Brooklyn Bridge at midnight and and there's nobody around and you give her the ring, then you don't have witnesses. But if you did it actually what I did when I got married was I gave the engagement ring to my sister-in-law to give to the Kala. I said, well, because then I gave it to her and I say, not as a shliach. I said, it's yours, matana to you. But
I told my wife specifically no L'Shem Kiddushin.
1962 or 1963, the Rosh Hashanah got up and proposed to, didn't get on his knee, and proposed to the woman he wished to marry. And she accepted the ring. And it was a Safek Kiddushin. And a week later, she figures, what kind of jerk proposes in front of 200 guys? And they, the Safek Kiddushin, there was a get. All right, enough war stories. Rabbi Danzig, yeshkayach.
Okay. Laila Tov, everybody.
Laila Tov, Shkoch.
Great day, guys.
Zag Baruch.